Good afternoon, and welcome to the Manetti Shrem Museum of Art. My name is Elaine, and I am an international relations and sociology major. I'll be graduating in 2025, and I'm currently serving as a visitor service assistant here at the museum. Before we begin today's program, we should take a moment to acknowledge the land on which UC Davis sits. For thousands of years, this land has been the home of the Patwin people. Today, there are 3 federally recognized Patwin tribes: Cachildihi, Band of Wintoon Indians of the Calusa Indian Community, Quetzaldihi, Wintoon Nation, and Yochadihi, Wintoon Nation. The Patwin people have remained committed to the stewardship of this land over many centuries. It has been cherished and protected as elders have instructed the young through generations. We are honored and grateful to be here today on their traditional lands. On behalf of myself and the entire staff of the Manetti Shrem Museum, thank you for joining us.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to welcome you here today. My name is Michael Yonan. I am the Allen Templeton Endowed Chair in the History of European Art, 1600 to 1830, and a professor in the art history program here at UC Davis. It's delightful to see a good crowd in the room to help us celebrate our graduating master's students who will present research from their thesis in just a moment. And before we do that, I would like to give the microphone over to the chair of the art history program, Professor Catherine Burnett, who's going to say a little bit about what has happened in the last year here, and I think you will see it's very exciting. So, Professor Burnett.
All right, thank you. Well, it is really wonderful to be with you all today to celebrate our graduate program in art history. It's a remarkable program. We do we really can talk. We do interdisciplinary research across the board in cultures from early to late all around the world. It's really cool stuff. We love what we do. We love our students. And we are here today to celebrate our students. But I really wanted to say a few words first about what has transpired, what's new, what we've all accomplished this year on a big scale. And so inspiringly, we have the College of Letters and Science and the Arts in particular has just been given an award, an endowment of $20 million. 1 million of this is going directly to art history. It will fund gradually over time, but in the interim, it's a state gift. So this funds will spin off some monies that the department can use a little bit at a time, and so look for some really nice changes. They might be small scale at first, but over time they'll be bigger and bigger and bigger. And what this large $40 million gift, $20 million gift means for the arts is that Mrs. Manetti Shrem is now one of the top donors to the university. One of the top 3 donors, if not the biggest donor of all across all the colleges. And so suddenly the College of L&S will be more important and will be visually more important, and the arts on campus will be more important. And so all boats rise on the same tide. The largest amount you don't need to know this. What's going to happen is that art history will become even stronger. We'll get even more applications to our wonderful program. We already have great students. We are now going to be assured that all of our students are going to be staying excellent forever. So we're really excited about this extremely generous gift. And similarly, on top of that amazing gift, Maria Manetti Shrem has a deep vision for the arts and a passion for the arts. And one of the things she'd like to see us do is get involved and have an opportunity to engage in Florence. And so as a way to possibly set up a UC Davis in Florence program, it's a possibility. It's not a definite. We're just talking ideas here. But as a way to dip our toe in and see if it will work, Mrs. Manetti Shrem is offering to help us pilot a program in which we will send 2 of our grad students to Florence for 1 month in September, basically the month of September effectively. Maybe a touch of October, but anyway, for the month of September. Those 2 students, to be determined, they've submitted their applications, so we're eager to read their applications and see who we can give these amazing funds to. They'll be paid for. Their airfare will be covered, a 1-month stipend will be covered, an apartment to live in will be covered, and the opportunity to meet with the artists who are visiting artists and the curators and directors and people involved in this modern and contemporary museum in Florence. And they can just go and breathe in Florentine art and culture and be inspired by what they see, think up new thoughts and have wonderful discussions and come back invigorated to share what they've learned and spur new ideas. So it's an exciting opportunity. We're really, really grateful, and we're really eager to see what our grad students make of this. Having said that, then, I want to shift gears a little bit. Although today's event really celebrates our grad students would not be our grad students doing the amazing projects that you're about to hear if it weren't for our amazing faculty. And one of the things that we learned when our undergraduate program was reviewed formally by the university with external people who come in, it's a big deal and a pain in the neck because, they really turn over every stone to make sure that we're doing things the right way. But what they determined was that our program was one of the most progressive in the nation. This is something that makes me extremely proud because we're a small little Mighty Mouse of a program, but we have this amazing faculty. So I thought I would just share some of the accomplishments of our faculty this year. So Michael Yonan published these various articles and chapters. I'll just read one: the portrait exchange between Stockholm and Vienna and the formation of Gustav III's round salon at Grishholm Castle. That sounds fancy. And he's also edited a special issue of Journal 18 on the issue of cold, temperature, and issues and how that affected 18th century art. Michael also edits journals, a book series, which enable other people to publish. And so he's a very well-regarded scholar of material culture and a leader of material culture. And we're so proud that he's here. He's been giving talks all over the place, including in Lyon, Boston, UC Davis, and Yale. Similarly, our Assistant Professor Alexandra Saferniev this is actually I have a prettier PowerPoint, and somehow or other I managed to send you my a not fixed up pretty one, but you can deal. Anyway, Alex organized in her museum studies course an exhibition that will open here in the Manetti Shrem in September, Light into Density, Abstract Encounters from 1920 to 1960, so come back in September. She published an article, The Dress of the Dancing Lares, did I say that right? In a book on textiles in motion. She was the fellowship winner of the Loeb Classical Library Foundation Fellowship at Harvard, and she presented a paper at Michigan. Colleen Grigor, an extraordinary scholar, was awarded the Letters in College Revitalization Research Grant and a book subvention grant for her forthcoming book, The Armenian Woman, from Columbia University. She published entries, encyclopedic entries, an article on Iranian tradition and fashionability in the 1974 Costumes of Armenian Women exhibition, and several other articles and chapters. She's become extremely active as an activist in her area and is doing all sorts of important work for the students, for the department, for her research area, and for the people who are engaged in her area of research. I'm wanting to show Hegnar next. Hegnar Wattenpaw, again, an amazing scholar, published a couple articles. And, you know, when you write an article, you know, a lot of people think that we professors have the dream job. I mean, in many ways, we do. I love what I do. It's really cool, and I'm grateful to have my job. But, you know, we don't get 3 months off in the summer to, you know, polish our toenails and eat chocolates. I mean, much as I wish, or sit on the beach. I mean, this is time that we have to research and bring together ideas and finally get a chance to publish these things. And then it's just a very time-consuming process that you're working 24/7, 12 months out of the year. Even when you're on vacation, your brain is going. So Hegnar published Islamic City, Colonial City, Refugee City, the urban histories of Aleppo during the French mandate on ordering imperial worlds from late medieval Spain to the contemporary Middle East. And other publications, like other faculty, she made a number of important presentations around the world. Just one of them is the first one, Architecture and Conviviality, the Emergence and Spread of Coffeehouse Culture, presented to the Society for Asian Art lecture series in the Asian Art Museum in San Francisco, one of my favorite places. So she's very active also as an activist with human rights and the human rights program on campus. And so it's just, you know, we have these amazing colleagues who are just really interesting, cool people doing really cool work. And okay, last but not least, I think, is me. Encouraged by Hegnar Wattenpaw, I applied and received a public scholarship fellow on campus for the new Office of Public Scholarship and Engagement as an activist faculty member. I published several articles, one of which is Contemporaneity in 17th Century Chinese Painting, Theory and Criticism, which I'm really excited to see in press already at Priming Studies and other things that are forthcoming. I'm really excited also to be able to say that this book series that I initiated has approved last week. This Global Tea Studies book series, which will be issued by Brill. Not only will we get to put our own logo on it, but UC Davis and the Global Tea Institute logos will be right there. And so it's branding. UC Davis will be spread around the world in different kinds of ways. Like my colleagues, I gave a number of public talks in the US and around the world, and had these wonderful experiences with different people around the world, and reinforced the friendships and the relationships that are important to art historians, to our department, to our students, to our faculty, to our university, and really, truly, for the nation to build these relationships and preserve solid, respectful relationships from nation to nation. And that's nothing small. So with that, I want to stop talking, but again, welcome you all here. We're excited to hear what our grad students have to say, because they have worked really hard for 2 years, and this is the culmination of all of that work. So Michael, it's up to you to explain. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Professor Burnett. I now want to just say a little bit of thanks to some of the people who are involved behind the scenes in getting this to work as it should. And it was working fine a second ago. I'm glad you're here, yes.
Did you open it?
No.
Do you want to open?
We could try opening one. This is the first
What are
one.
we waiting for?
Well, I'm going to say some thanks,
Oh.
but like it just lost my desktop.
Okay, here.
Well, yeah, while you do that, let me say a couple of words of thanks. First of all, to the Manetti Shrem Museum and its staff, never more needed than right now. There we go. Paul Dugan, Linda Alvarez, Randy Roberts, and other people who have been kind enough to let us have the event here and to help us make it such a lovely experience in this beautiful building. I really want to thank Rochelle Agundas, who's sitting back there, the grad coordinator for the MA program. Oh, yeah. So I may serve as the grad advisor, but the grad coordinator plays a crucial role in making this all happen. And I would like to say that, you know, in a world where mediocrity is sort of the norm, it's great to work with someone who's really excellent at what they do. So thank you, Rochelle. I would like to thank Leea Tice and Lisa Zadibble, the support staff for Art History in the Visual Resources Center. Yes, they deserve applause too. For handling a million important things behind the scene that enable our program to run smoothly. And I'd like to thank my colleagues, the fellow faculty of our program. I can say that the faculty at this institution care deeply about graduate education and work very hard to make sure that our students are getting the best experience they can have here at UC Davis, because we want them to go out into the world and be terrific art historians. And then I just want to say one brief comment about art history. So art history, we love it, right? Like, you know, we do it because we love it and we care about it and we believe in art. But I'm gonna say something right now that we all know and we believe, but then the general public perhaps does not believe, which is that doing art history is actually very challenging. It's a lot of work. Works of art don't talk normally, typically they don't talk. Once in a while, maybe an artist makes a talking work of art. But most of them don't talk. They are mute, and our job as art historians is to make them speak, to make people understand them, and to help the world appreciate what went into the production of the work of art and what the work of art can tell us about the past. Art history involves skills that we don't commonly use, and our program is not a leisurely blow-off thing, right, folks? No, it's not. It's a rigorous program in which we ask our students to produce at a high level and really develop and learn and hone their skills. So the students that you will hear today are presenting you work that is the result of at least a year's worth of thinking, and in many cases more than that, and it's a real sort of achievement for them to have made it to this point. One final thing I'd like to say, which is that the program has 5 speakers listed. There will actually only be 4 speakers today, and those are the first 4 speakers listed on the program. And having said that, we will dive right into our first speaker, who is Kayetana Klinghoffer. Kayetana is one of our own, having earned her undergraduate degree from our department in 2022. She is interested in Olmec culture, one of the pre-Columbian societies of pre-modern Mexico, and she has studied under the tutelage of Professor John Lopez. Her paper is titled Figurine Number 9, an example of Olmec feminine power at La Venta. So,
thank you for that very kind welcome. I am just going to try to get back to the very first slide so that we can start, which it does not want to do. It prefers the end. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you again for the warm welcome, and thank you, Dr. Lopez, for your support in the last 2 years in helping me get to this place. With that, we will begin. Influential women are slowly being written into history, a fact confirmed by performing an internet search for ancient history's most powerful women. The search yields a short list, starting with such well-known names as Cleopatra, Theodora, Hatshepsut, Agrippa the Younger, and Catherine the Great. Towards the end of such a list, the names of a single Chinese empress, Wu Qian, and a Chinese pirate, Xing Shi, appear amongst the famous Western ones. Reading the list makes it clear that the presence of powerful women can be accepted. However, this acceptance appears to extend only to the West and the cultures that the West has unfolded into its historical narrative, including ancient Egypt and certain parts of Asia. The order, and more importantly, the absences, suggest the power of women from cultures considered to be peripheral are dampened or non-existent. This ideology, however, is contradicted by archaeological excavations. The 2005 unearthing of the Peruvian Mochica, Lady of Kao, from circa 450 AD, who was buried with the implements of rulership, is one example. The noteworthy tomb of Lady Fu Hao from circa 1200 BCE, who besides being a king's wife, was a priestess and a military general, is another. The female baby-face figurine number 9 from circa 900 to 700 BCE, initially labeled a male and found in 1955 in the Olmec heartland of Mesoamerica, is still another instance. Though easily missed due to her presence in an offering containing 15 other small stone baby face figurines, a close examination of figurine number 9 reveals a robust set of elite indicators that clearly reflect her feminine power. This thesis has highlighted the assortment of visual and physical cues, including positioning, aesthetics, and potential motifs, pointing to how they convey, individually and together, figurine number 9's esteem and influence in ancient Mesoamerica. Information which should guarantee her a spot on the list of ancient history's most powerful women. Figurine number 9 is part of offering number 4, which was discovered in situ in the ceremonial court of the Olmec capital, La Venta, in Tabasco, Mexico. Though the ceremonial court held an impressive number of elite offerings, offering number 4's discovery was sheer chance. When the 1955 archaeological team called for the last pass of the bulldozer at the end of a long, hot day, they were merely clearing dirt. They never expected a circular patch of soil incongruent with its surroundings to appear. Nor, after digging down, did they expect to find 22 stone artifacts, including 6 jadeite celts, which are non-utilitarian ritual axe heads, and 16 baby-faced figurines made from a variety of imported materials, including jadeite and serpentine. The majority of the offerings discovered at La Venta were either collections of celts or jewelry, and the offerings which did contain figurines did not include more than 3. The number of stone artifacts and the offerings' placement in the ceremonial court of one of only 3 Olmec capitals broadcast the offering's high value and importance to the ancient Olmec. However, the offering's true surprise was not the number of artifacts it held or its placement within the city. It was the arrangement of the offering that has held academics and the public's fascination for the last 70 years. Each artifact had been placed upright and secured by a thick red clay substrate around their bases, without which they would topple. The 6 stelae had been placed to form a semicircular architectural wall on the eastern side of the offering, with a solitary granite figurine placed before them. 11 other figurines created the opposing semicircular western wall. These 2 walls formed a circular arena for the offering and left an open pathway, a central axis of sorts, down which a line of 4 figurines approached a captivating 5th figure, figurine number 22, who stood alone at the edge of the southern border. Anyone who has looked at the offering noted that the artifacts appeared to be depicting an event. No other offerings like it have been found at any of the various Olmec sites across Mesoamerica, suggesting that the event being portrayed was culturally significant. Clearly, all the artifacts' offerings have relevance. The solitary figure before the Eastern Celts looked to be a conductor of ceremonies or a leader, while the 11 loosely clustered figurines in the West seemed to be acting as an audience. And yet the audience's attention were not solely fixed on the leader. Rather, their focus was split between the procession line and the figurine number 22, making those 5 figurines primary characters in the offering. Although typically one would assume that the first person in the line of the procession and the awaiting figurine number 22 were the most important characters. However, figurine number 9's movements disrupt this interpretation and reveal her power. She distinguished herself with an unexpected movement. She broke protocol by stepping to the left. The move separated her from the clean line connecting the procession to the waiting figurine number 22, and this liberty allowed her an unobstructed view of him. But more importantly, the move can only result from an independent agency that implies high status and power. With her actions, she shows that she is unconcerned with the repercussions for her deviance. Moreover, the move, an ensuing connection to figurine number 22, forged through a mutual gaze, set these 2 figurines apart from the whole offering, and as they connect, the whole assemblage becomes about the conversation between them, one important male and one powerful female, and relegates everyone else to secondary. Her capacity to shift the dynamic of the event insinuates her role may be closer to a leadership one in the community. With her breach of etiquette and overall shift to the activities enacted within La Venta's offering number 4, the female figurine number 9 relays her status. She is both a primary character and a leader, and as such, her power and influence within the ancient Olmec capital is highlighted. A close scrutiny of figurine number 9's baby face traits reveals further evidence of her primacy. Although one of 16 baby face figurines in the offering, figurine number 9's features are the most pronounced. However, to see her differences, it is first necessary to define the baby face. The small stone baby face genre is typified by the use of common features associated with Olmec ascetics, and more importantly, Olmec supernaturals. They include almond-shaped eyes in puffy lids, prominent but often wide noses with conically drilled nostrils, mouths with protruding, flaring upper lips and drooping corners that are often described as snarling, and heavy jowls. Their bald heads are distinctive with their erect tabular cranial modifications. Their ears are highly stylized. The ears are typically pierced, and occasionally the septums are as well. Their bodies are simple, almost abstract human forms. From the front, they appear to be androgynous with no apparent sexual organs, and from the side, they are quite flattened. Any curvature results from heads that sit on forward-thrusting necks above sloped shoulders. They stand on barely bent legs that are spread in a V, and their arms hold a similar pose away from the body. Of these traits, the most closely associated with the supernatural are the tilted almond eyes, heavy jowls, and snarling mouths. While the sex of the babyface figurines is almost indistinguishable due to lack of obvious sexual organs, their sex can be determined by slight body shaping and the presence of defining incised lines. Males are defined by the presence of a broad, inverted U or a straight line under their pectorals, simple wrapped loincloths and belts on natural waists or above, and kilt-shaped codpieces. Females can be ascertained by 2 U's or a W under the breasts, with or without the protrusion of breasts, clearly carved pubic Y's, and projecting buttocks with deeply defined cleavage. Which brings us back to figurine number 9. What are her visible differences from the other figurines in the offering? Based on this image, one might assume that she has the smallest head in the offering. However, her image was reduced to fit alongside her counterparts. In truth, her head constitutes 40% of her body, rather than the figurine's 30%. A large portion is relegated to her cranial modification, which again is the grandest, and forges a closer connection to supernaturals like the maze deity. This extra space has also facilitated the addition of her other enhanced babyface traits. She has almond-shaped eyes set in puffy lids. They are the most tilted of the offering. While some of the other figurines' puffy, over-large eyes suggest childlike proportions, hers are neither too large nor too small and are realistically direct. Where on her counterparts, the puffy lids around overly large horizontal eyes evince the swollen features of boxers after a fight, figurine number 9's eye sockets and lids feel balanced in proportion to her face. Likewise, the choice to drill through her septum rather than drilling 2 straight nostril holes from the front has removed the slightly piggish and occasionally unbalanced look present in some of her compatriots. The most realistically unlikely of her features is her over-accentuated toothless mouth, and a toothless mouth is a purely supernatural trait. Despite being one of the largest mouths in the offering, it still manages to fit her face without appearing aggressive or swollen, and illuminates her close connection to the were-jaguar and other supernaturals. Figurine number 9's puffy, steeply sloping upper lip somehow neither seems fake nor abnormal. Rather, it adds an exotic cast to her face that complements her slanting eyes. Her enhanced babyface features distinguish her within the offering, cement her ties to the supernatural, and suggest she does deserve a closer examination. The next notable difference can be observed in figurine number 9's body. Like the offering's other figurines, she stands atop crude, flattened feet with only shallow cuts to indicate toes. Her large head sits on sizable trapezius muscles that, when combined with the barely tapered limbs and complete lack of a waist, give her body a boxy, androgynous shape that is mirrored in the other figurines. The squarish frontal view does little to prepare viewers for her profile, which reveals a sinuous thinness bordering on delicacy. Within the offering, her thinness is only replicated in the equally thin celts. However, in sharp contrast to the flat celts, figurine number 9's body undulates in an extended S-curve. Her head is pushed so far forward that it actually creates a hunchback. Her upper body's contortion is contrasted and accentuated by the unusual placement of her knees, which land closer to her hips than physically possible. A glance at her backside also reveals that her heavily cleaved buttocks are almost aligned with her armpits, another impossibility. The position of her knees is too high up, leaving her with incredibly long shins, and her hips, well, they have no choice but to slant forwards in an attempt to balance her twisted form. While little effort has been put towards establishing an age for figurine number 9, this thesis asserts that she is elderly. The heavily bent body looks like a grandmother curved with time. Her missing left hand surely clutches a cane. Her head sits on shoulders severely stooped by age, and to counterbalance her hunched back, her pelvis is thrust forward as she gingerly makes her way across the street. For this figurine to reflect an elderly woman in a time when people did not live to the ripe old age as we do today is in itself another marker of her importance and esteem, and one we would recognize. We would call her wise woman. Figurine number 9's back has been emphasized with several incised lines. The first begins at the top of her buttocks and moves upward to form a spinal line. The two lines split the central trunk to form straight dashes above each buttocks, accentuating them. Then the spinal line continues upwards before it again forks outwards to define her scapula. Like those above the buttocks, this detail adds natural definition to her back. Notably, the two scapula lines run over the shoulders where they appear to connect to another pair of lines that descend from a four-pointed star on the back of her head. The confluence of lines creates a secondary star on the nape of her neck and forces one to consider the stars as if they are symbols rather than naturalistic accents. This thesis proposes that the two stars, which are unique to figurine number 9 and Leventa's offering number 4, may suggest a more profound connection to the Olmec supernatural. However, my interpretation is two-sided. On one hand, the stars may just be star motifs. On the other hand, they may indicate the addition of a mask. As a star, they would act as icons of a larger concept. But as a mask, they would be insertion points for a figure who is influential enough to don the supernatural visage. Either scenario separates figurine number 9 from her brethren and links her to the Olmec supernatural. Examples of star in Olmec imagery can be found, but they are limited. They appear on several hollow ceramic figurines that are, due to their limited appearance, believed to be linked to a secret Olmec cult, one which worshipped an early representation of Quetzalcoatl. He is linked to the Venus star as an indicator of his capacity to act as a healer, and notably will become one of the most prominent deities in Mesoamerica. Although most associate Quetzalcoatl and his feathered serpent with the later Aztec, two monumental stone figural depictions, one from the first Olmec capital, San Lorenzo, and another from Leventa, prove that Quetzalcoatl existed in Mesoamerica long before the Aztec. As to the proposal of a mask, it is hard not to find Olmec masks when one explores the artifacts available, suggesting that the Olmec did utilize them, and that figurine number 9 may very well have been meant to reflect a figure wearing a mask. Moreover, the masks that are available are heavily influenced by the Olmec supernatural, making this theory more believable. Even if we overlooked figurine number 9's position, enhanced aesthetics, and supernatural motifs, her material immediately catches the eye. First, figurine number 9's color is novel within the offering and Leventa. In this picture's lighting, she is pale and sparkling, while the color of the other figurines suggests a reflection of the physical world around them. Figurine number 9's light, creamy white coloring brings to mind the sparkling surface of a spring or a creek, because between her masterful high polish and light tone, she is capable of reflecting the colors around her. Thus, figurine number 9's color seems to fluidly shift from one tone to another, depending on the light. How this chameleon-like facade would have been received and potentially employed by the Olmec is difficult to determine. Her jadeite's crystalline material is sprinkled with a light webbing of rust-colored veins and enhanced by undertones of sky blue that seem to glow. The crystals are so clear that given the right conditions, figurine number 9 becomes translucent, a feature which can be seen in her left armpit, right over there. Archaeologists, none of the other figurines in the offering, nor the celts, which are also jadeite, have this capacity to become translucent. Archaeologist Matthew Sterling noted that prior to 1961, archaeologists had yet to document any instances of white jade being isolated for use. Clearly, figurine number 9's white glue material was chosen with intention. The second important fact, and one that you've heard come out of my mouth a couple times, is she is jadeite. And she is the only jadeite figurine in offering number 4. Jadeite, better known as jade, continues to hold significance in modern times for its hard, glassy surface that can achieve incredibly high mirror-like polishes and has a tensile strength that allows for precise carving of even the smallest of stones. The Olmec valued the stone as well, a value that is confirmed by the lengths they went to acquire it. To date, only one source of jadeite has been identified near the Olmec region, and that is in Montijo Valley in Guatemala, in the very southern tip of the Olmec region. The mine is actually close to 476 miles away from La Venta. The choice to utilize the expensive, difficult to acquire, and even harder to work jadeite rather than wood, ceramic, fabric, or even a softer but still imported stone like serpentine indicates the Olmec's desire that figurine number 9 have durability and longevity. These traits are confirmed by the break on her missing arm. It has been softened by extensive handling, indicating that the figurine had a long life prior to her inclusion in this offering. The presence of traces of red cinnabar, a mineral not found within offering number 4, but found in a number of elite offerings and burials at La Venta, suggests that figurine number 9 participated in many rituals prior to her inclusion in this final offering. The residual red mineral, also another indication of her elite status, is not found in any low status offerings. To summarize, on its own, figurine number 9's jadeite material is elite, and it showcases La Venta's stable trade routes, prominence, and influence in the Olmen region and beyond during its prime. The inclusion of figurine number 9 within the high status La Venta offering number 4 is another indicator of her value to the La Ventan community. That the offering was deposited in the ceremonial heart of La Venta adds a ritualistic significance to figurine number 9 that is already a culturally relevant offering. Figurine number 9's position within said offering imbues her with consequence. Not only is she a member of the central procession, a condition which elevates her stature among the 15 other figurines, but she also acts with agency, disrupting an event that was so carefully recorded and preserved by La Venta. And lastly, her enhanced Olmec babyface features and the stars that decorate her body, whether they be motifs or the flaps of a mask, form a strong, unbreakable link to the Olmec supernatural. All these factors combined have contributed to this thesis's claim. Figurine number 9 represents a powerful elderly woman from ancient Mesoamerica who readily flexed said power in La Venta even as she served an unknown but important role at the La Ventan capital. Thank you.
And now I'd like to introduce our second speaker, Margaret Culuris-Harp. Maggie came to us after earning a BA at the University of Nevada, Reno. Here at UC Davis, she is specialized in ancient art, studying with Professor Alexandra Sofroniev, and has some exciting developments ahead of her. She has been awarded a Fulbright to Israel for the 24-25 academic year, so she will be studying abroad. And following that, she will begin the PhD program in art history at Washington University in St. Louis. So we're very happy for you. The title of her paper today is The Beth Alpha Zodiac Wheel, a Jewish iconographic reaction to Roman rule and Jewish literature.
Okay, thank you for that introduction. Okay, let's see if I can. What? Oh, sorry. Where is the? Yeah. Just can't even find the first thing.
Something is glitchy
Yeah.
here. Yeah. there's something amiss here, because
This is how it should be.
yeah, we closed this, but somehow it's still.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, there you go.
Alrighty, thank you so much for helping. So again, thank you everyone for coming here. I first want to thank the Manetti Shrem Museum and the Department of Art History for putting on this lovely event. Joseph Suad for funding my summer research. My committee members and my advisor, Professor Safraniev, my family, and all who helped me along the way. Before I start my talk, I want to address the terms I will use. There are many terms for the region where this art was found. Eretz Yisrael is the Hebrew term for this region. Palestine is the term the Romans assigned to the province of Judea after the Bar Kokhba revolt in the 2nd century CE. I will use the term Palestine to refer to this region, and Palestinian Jews for the Jewish population living here, underneath the Roman Empire in late antiquity. So now, let us imagine. It is an early morning in 6th century Palestine. The nearby mountains of Gilboa are a dusty brown, almost as far as the eye can see. Plain mud brick houses and shops blend into the unremarkable landscape. Just off of the major road to Bet Shean and Caesarea, few visited the town of Beth Alpha. This town relies on agriculture as the primary means of survival. In the summer months, there will be flashes of bluegrass and purple thistle in the land of milk and honey, but otherwise the landscape is dull and devoid of color. It is a typical late antique Shabbat, the Jewish day of rest. The whole town makes their way down the road, and all are dressed in their finest. All head to a far two-story building, much larger than the mud brick dwellings, but otherwise blends in with the surrounding countryside. Before entering the synagogue for Shabbat worship, the Palestinian Jews entered a liminal space, the courtyard. Plaster walls set aside the space from the greater village and foothills. If anyone would have looked up, they would have seen Beth Alpha's tiled roof, typical for a Roman or Byzantine era building. They would not have stayed long in this space. Perhaps there are small conversation, or even the rabbi greeting shul goers, but many of them would turn immediately to the right of the courtyard and see a small arch colonnade. 6 to 7 stunted Doric columns mark the transition from courtyard to synagogue. Across from the third and middle archway in the courtyard lies the main entrance to the synagogue's hall. This space marks the transition from where the mundane becomes sacred and where communal worship begins. When Beth Alpha's Jews walk underneath the colonnade and through the main entrance, they are greeted with anything but the all too familiar neutrals of the Levantine landscape. The entrance to Beth Alpha is illuminated by a series of oil lamps, and the mosaic begins with these inscriptions to the builders and donors in Greek, Aramaic, and Hebrew. The local Palestinian Jewish population is greeted by a series of colorful and majestic mosaics contrasting with their normal scenery. Before the men congregate on the first floor and the women on the second, they would have seen a main nave with a smaller aisle on each side of it. The main nave, with its colorful mosaics and inscriptions illuminated by faint lamplight and sunshine, is the focal point and marks a complete divergence from the outside world. The decoration of the central nave forms the analytical foundation of this thesis. Late antique Jews, when they entered their synagogue, drew upon not only their iconography, but their literature, both canonical and apocryphal, and cultural experiences underneath the Romans to understand the imagery and its role as part of the synagogue ritual. I propose a new interpretation of the Beth Alpha zodiac mosaic that takes into account not only visual analysis, but the literature, history, and cultural experiences as a means to explain the mosaics, particularly the central portion of the nave, and their hybrid nature as works of both Jewish and Roman influence. Specifically, I argue that not only do the mosaics at Beth Alpha reflect the late antique artistic landscape and represent aspects of Jewish time, place, and personhood, but they go so far as to further the literary and cultural thread of Messianic thought by equating the pagan sun deity Helios, pictured at the center of the main floor mosaic, seen on the screen, to the Jewish patriarch David. Jewish art is widely and falsely understood to be limited by the aniconic ruling of the second commandment. Yet, as Beth Alpha's Jews experienced, Jewish art vacillated between waves of aniconic and figurative moments. Late antiquity saw an increase of figurative works in strictly Jewish spaces. The late antique socio-political landscape was a diverse one, with the emergence of Christianity, the changing power of the pagan religion, and the Jewish reconstruction from temple to rabbinic practices. Jewish artistic traditions at this time reflect the diverse and syncretic nature of the main Mediterranean religions of the time. Late antique Jews continued to use foreign motifs to both fit into broader society and better understand their time, place, and personhood under an increasingly syncretic religious and socio-political landscape. Sorry about that. Knowledge of prior Jewish history and artistic motifs are essential to contextualize how the Beth Alpha synagogue used figurative imagery, but did not break the second commandment prohibiting idol worship. The Hasmoneans were a dynasty of Jewish rulers in the 1st century BCE, until Herod the Great replaced them and ruled Judea as a proxy for the Romans. The Hasmoneans originally gained independence from the Greek Seleucids. They oversaw Judea and its surrounding regions. They later minted coinage to assert their power. Numismatic imagery from the Hasmonean dynasty included anchor, architectural, solar, and vegetal motifs like that of the palm branches relating to the Jewish holiday of Sukkot. In Hasmonean mosaics, geometric carpets decorated important religious and personal spaces with triangular, circular, and roped edges similar to what we will see later on. Although Hasmonean iconography did not showcase figural imagery, their art represented Jewish culture and thus pride in their identity. Prior to the Hasmoneans, Jews in both the diaspora and Eretz Yisrael faced heavy discrimination, whether that be at the hands of the Babylonians centuries prior or to the Seleucids and Romans. Aniconic imagery became associated with the Hasmoneans, and thusly, aniconic imagery became associated with Jewish self-determination. However, Jewish autonomy did not last. While this paper does not go into depth on Jewish history, one event is of particular importance: the destruction of the Second Temple. In the summer of 70 CE, Emperor Titus and his armies demolished the Second Temple in response to Jewish rebellions. The later Bar Kokhba revolts saw the Romans expel the Jewish population from Jerusalem and rename the region. Without the Second Temple, and without access to their holy city, worship changed. No longer could the Jewish people make pilgrimage to the temple. Jewish rituals became confined to a community synagogue and rabbi rather than priests in the temple. After the destruction of the Second Temple, Judaism reorganized itself around the synagogue and rabbi, what we now call rabbinical Judaism. Beth Alpha was built during this reconstruction. It was among numerous synagogues throughout the late antique Roman world whose patrons and communities chose to put zodiac wheels on the floor. These zodiac wheels are situated in a landscape and time in which pagan and Christian usage of Helios, the seasons, and the zodiac were prolific. The Beth Alpha zodiac mosaic fits into the iconographic choices of other late antique synagogues. While zodiac wheels appear in many late antique synagogues, 4 are agreed upon by scholars: Na'aran, Sepphoris, Hamat Tiberius, and of course, Beth Alpha. Each of these synagogue zodiac mosaics maintain the same basic layout. 2 concentric circles and a square mosaic section that surround the central tondo of a Helios figure in a chariot pulled by horses. The outer circle contains all 12 zodiac symbols and personifications of the 4 seasons in the corners. In fact, this combination of the zodiac wheel, seasons, and a Helios motif is only seen in a synagogue context. The zodiac itself has a long pagan history. Beginning in Babylonia around approximately 1300 BCE, it then transitioned into the Greek zodiac in the 5th century BCE that we are most familiar with today. The depictions of the zodiac within the late antique landscape do not appear to be limited to one religion or group, but rather are found within Christian, Jewish, and pagan spaces throughout Palestine. Firstly, the zodiac plays a significant part in Mithraism. Sculptures and mosaics of Mithras, the lead cult figure in the Roman mystery cult, use the zodiac. This intact sculpture on the screen is from Rome and depicts Mithras fighting a bull. We can assume a similar decoration would have been found in the Caesarea Maritima Mithraeum, a Roman site in Eretz Yisrael. In Mithras Toroktonos, the hero kills a bull, a scorpion strikes its testicles, and both a dog and snake drink the flowing blood. While few Roman citizens had full access to the Mithraeum, and they were certainly not Jewish, the Mithraeum reflects the cultural interest in the zodiac, astrology, and the heavenly bodies as a whole. Now we will move on to other monotheistic depictions. Many late antique Christian spaces contain zodiac references, whether they be the earlier house church or the more formal basilica space. One of the closest Christian spaces to Beth Alpha in late antiquity is Beth Shean. This well-known Christian space had a central zodiac mosaic similar to Beth Alpha, a zodiac surrounding central roundel, but in this case, it is Helios and Selene in the center. Unlike the Mithraeans, Beth Shean gathered the images of the zodiac into one central wheel, where they each had their own section on the circle. However, like at Beth Alpha, the labels of the zodiac figures were done in a similar fashion, but solely in Greek rather than Aramaic or Hebrew. The inclusion of zodiac imagery in Beth Alpha, like the seasons, has both decorational and religious significance. The 12 zodiac signs denote specific time periods within the calendar, such as Scorpio for the Hebrew month of Cheshvan. The Jewish liturgical calendar incorporates the zodiac. When we take this interpretation into account, not only does the use of the zodiac imagery reflect Roman imperial decoration, but continues the temporal interpretation of this mosaic. The 12 months on the Hebrew calendar, excluding the second edition of Adar in the Hebrew leap year, are reflected in this zodiac wheel. The 4 seasons very clearly represent time. When one looks at the seasons, an immediate calendrical aspect comes up. Humans past and present orient themselves based on time and what surrounds them. Representations of the seasons were common in Roman pagan art. For example, on the funerary objects such as the famous sarcophagus of Junius Bassus. In the center of the Beth Alpha mosaic, there's a man guiding a chariot pulled by 4 horses. And yes, believe me, those are horses. This man is Helios. Helios, or Sol Invictus, was a prolific motif throughout the broader Roman world. Sol Invictus means invincible sun in English, but is often used synonymously for Helios and was common on coins and other mosaics. For example, this tetradrachmon of Maximian showcases such use of Helios. Metal sunlight radiates outward towards the edge of the coin and to everyone who touched it. Helios, through coinage, was a widely dispersed image of the Roman Empire. Helios was not just a religious and imperial figure, but a common motif in household decoration. For example, this late Roman house mosaic, earthed in modern-day Sparti, Greece, depicts the solar god in a central format. He is classically rendered, looking over to his left at an unknown scene. He wears a cape. It is silhouetted by a yellow disc with orange lines, presumably sun rays emanating out. In addition, the Helios motif was found in both Judaic and Christian spaces. As seen prior, Bet Shean church mosaic contained this zodiac, and at the center is Helios along Selene as a married couple. Now that we have established that the elements of the zodiac wheel derive from a shared Mediterranean artistic tradition, we can now begin to understand how Jews would have perceived this within a liturgical and religious context. As established previously, the combination of seasons, Helios on his chariot, and the zodiac wheel was unique to Jewish spaces. Much of the scholarship regarding late antique synagogue zodiac wheels concerns the figural imagery at not only Beth Alpha, but also the synagogues at Sepphoris, Hamat Tiberias, and Na'aran. There is no overall consensus on what role the zodiac wheel plays in late antique Judaism, nor the role of the figurative mosaic floors as a whole. The major arguments, to be outlined further within this section and outlined further within my thesis, claim that Helios is symbolic of the Jewish God or the Messiah. However, whether Helios is a representation of the Jewish Messiah and the exact identity of the Messiah is debated. I am responding to the call for further investigation of a possible Jewish interpretation of the Helios motif. My research identifies David as the messianic character of Helios within Beth Alpha. David has long been associated with the archetype of an ideal Jewish man. Davidic lineage is a central tenet of Jewish messianic thought. Despite the supposed prohibition on images within Judaism, David was commonly depicted in late antique Jewish art. Davidic depictions prior to Beth Alpha moved from portraying David as a king to an increasingly liturgical version of him. First, the Dura Europos synagogue shown on the screen showcases David as king in the Samuel anointing David fresco. Here, he's anointed in the fashion of the canonical work of 1 Samuel. The fresco presents the Israelite king as worthy of anointment to its audience. Anointment is an act and ritual where the recipient, David here, is set apart strictly for divine use and as an extension of God's rule. David in the Samuel fresco at Dura Europos is depicted as a divine agent for kingship specifically. However, the Gaza synagogue's depiction of David differs. The only reference to David's kingship is his crown. Instead, he is surrounded by music and animals. This distinct Orphic addition to David emphasized him as a prayer leader and writer of the Psalms. In the canonical tradition found in 2 Samuel, David becomes washed of his sins. We no longer recognize David has flaws. This mosaic shows him only in a perfect light and illustrates a change in the late antique perception of the Israelite king. Rather than alluding to his sins by depicting him with Goliath or as king, and therefore foreshadowing the wife he would win but also commit adultery against, we only see David's link to music, liturgy, and prayer. Helios in the Beth Alpha zodiac exhibits these exact same characteristics. The description of David in the literature, like the light at morning of sunrise, is precisely how one could describe Helios. David is connected with the weather, his creation of songs and psalms, and even the direct words of God. Thus, he becomes synonymous with the power and control of such phenomena. One can see a connection to the Davidic tropes of power, song, and kingship within this Helios mosaic. Yet, in Psalm 151, David is not only described as the king, but the pastoral Messiah for the Jewish people. He plays psalms on his lute, and he will remove all reproach from the Jewish people. David is the savior of all the Jews. David, in this piece of apocryphal literature, was the Messiah. A son from his line was to save the Jewish people. If Helios is to represent a Messiah to the Jewish viewer, David is the top contender. David and Helios, so far, have been linked in terms of ideas, but perhaps some of the strongest evidence for Helios' identification as David is his textual descriptions. David, in the late antique mystic text Hekalat Rabati, is described as wearing a holy crown, a crown of light that mimics the crown seen in the Beth Alpha mosaic. Additionally, the word for throne, Merkavah, the holy and fiery throne of God, first found in Ezekiel 1, David sits upon. This can also be translated as chariot. David, in the apocryphal literature, controls God's throne and chariot while wearing a holy crown of fire and starlight. These descriptions are the same as what we saw in the Helios mosaic, and Beth Alpha's community did not commission this work coincidentally. Lastly, David's composition, another piece of apocrypha, presents the Jewish patriarch as not only partially divine in nature, a clear messianic aspect, but as the one who controlled and set up liturgical time. Helios, in conjunction with the zodiac and seasons, acts as the Messiah in the center of time at Beth Alpha. The zodiac and seasons represent the time, place, and personhood of the Jewish culture, and with David as Helios in the center, fits into the known literature and attitudes towards David prior to and during late antiquity. So, imagine we are the late 6th century Jewish congregation on Shabbat. We are confronted with this image of Helios in our synagogue, knowing, as the literate Jews we are, the iconography of David, or perhaps we even hear a Davidic passage. We may conflate the two individuals. When we go to Beth Alpha, we are not just seeing the trendy late antique art movement. Rather, we see the entire Jewish worldview and the hope for Messiah found in David and his liturgy. Thank you.
And now it is my pleasure to introduce our third speaker, Allison Nakazawa. Allison earned her BA in art history from Cal State University in Fresno, her hometown. And she is interested in early modern European art, mostly in Italy and in England, and especially in the history of ceramics, which she wrote about even as an undergraduate and continued in her research here under my tutelage. She turned her attention here at UC Davis to English porcelain and traveled to New York to do research at the Metropolitan Museum of Art last summer in their very fine collection of Chelsea porcelain. Her paper today is titled, Quite Contrary, Slippages of Meaning in a Chelsea Perfume Vase.
Yeah.
We're figuring this out.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Yonan, for that kind introduction and for being such an amazing advisor. Perhaps no artist better exemplifies the English Rococo than William Hogarth, a painter and a printmaker deeply entrenched in the socio-political sphere of 18th century London. Hogarth's staunch nationalism and keen awareness of societal issues informed a series of paintings that satirically explore the consequences of a loveless arranged marriage between the nouveau riche daughter of a merchant and the son of an impoverished nobleman. In the fourth installment of the series, The Toilette, Hogarth presents a scene of domestic discord and moral degradation. Set within an opulent dressing room or toilette, the room is brimming with foreign luxury goods like porcelain cups, among queer individuals and styles that characterize the fantastical muchness of the continental Rococo. And so, through themes of luxury, queerness, continental influence, classical mythology, colonialism present in the 18th century England, Hogarth furthers his satirical goals. This painting serves as a frame, thematizing the same concepts as the subject of my thesis, a perfume vase produced by London's Chelsea Porcelain Manufactory in 1760. Now in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, the Callisto vase, as I shall refer to it, bears a quatrefoil with a scene of Jupiter and Callisto from Ovid's Metamorphoses, modeled after an engraving by René Gaillard of Francois Boucher's 1759 painting. Reclined together in an intimate embrace, the god Jupiter, disguised as the goddess Diana, and nymph Callisto are placed amid a gilded gold ground covered in intertwined, realistic, life-sized flowers, creating a visually sapphic scene. While categorically British, according to the Met, the vase owes its visual and material existence to sources from around the globe. The Central Reserve painting is after two French artists. Many of the flowers depicted are not native to Europe. The vase is made from imitation Chinese soft paste porcelain, and its overall design is inspired by wares produced by the German Meissen and Sevres porcelain factories. This global hybridity is a direct product of the ebb and flow of London's connection to the rest of Europe, mirroring the expanding British Empire now under King George III and German Queen Charlotte. This talk proposes a potential reading into the Callisto vase that explores the interplay between queerness and global affairs within 18th century London. While William Hogarth's The Toilette provides historical presence to male queerness amongst the aristocracy through aesthetics, I interpret the Callisto vase as a luxury object meant for a woman of the upper classes who potentially would have recognized the classical literary references of Ovid and Sappho and made a possible connection between her own identity and that of the vase. The original Ovidian myth begins with the nymph Callisto, a companion of Diana and daughter of the king of Arcadia. Fresh from the hunt and alone in a wooded pastoral setting, her great beauty captures the attention of Jupiter, the infamously unfaithful king of the gods. He devises a scheme to seduce her while keeping his notoriously jealous wife, Juno, unaware. Knowing Callisto's vow of chastity would have made her wary of a man's approach, he cunningly assumes the form of his daughter, Diana, in body, attire, and manner. Now disguised, Jupiter kisses Callisto, then rapes her, resulting in a pregnancy that she attempts to conceal from Diana and the other huntresses. However, when they later bathe in the river, they discover her swollen belly, prompting her expulsion from Diana's followers. Taking from this myth, Boucher created at least 4 known versions of depicting Jupiter in the guise of Diana with Callisto. The 1744 version at the Pushkin Museum in Moscow, the 1759 version at the Nelson Atkins Museum in Kansas City, Missouri, the 1763 version at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, and the 1769 version at the Wallace Collection in London. Collectively, these 4 versions share several common elements: a pyramidal composition, longing gazes, putti, a watching eagle, a revealing nip slip, in a pastoral Arcadian setting. However, in every version except the Nelson Atkins version, Diana is in the midst of an action that varies across the paintings. reaching towards Callisto's face in the Pushkin version, removing Callisto's garments in the Wallace Collection version, or both in the Met version. Amidst these variations, the Nelson Atkins version stands out as an outlier. It is comparatively the most passive, but also the most erotically charged, as Callisto's nudity is the most pronounced, with her entire left side bare. This version captures the moment just after Jupiter approached Callisto, but directly before he kisses her, the final instance of her blissful ignorance. At first glance, Boucher's Jupiter and Callisto appear as depictions of two female-presenting figures entwined in a sensual embrace, creating a visually sapphic image despite the heterosexual nature of the myth. In this version, and consequently the Callisto vase, Jupiter appears in Diana's form, reclined and covered perpendicularly by Callisto's body, both nude among a leopard fur and silks in the wooded backdrop described by Ovid. They gaze longingly into each other's eyes as two putti play in the trees, while one approaches the couple near Callisto's legs, poised to strike her with an arrow of love. Diana is recognizable by her headdress, bow, and quiver of arrows, and has her true male form concealed behind Callisto's body, lacking clear indications of female anatomy, in stark contrast to Callisto's nearly full exposure. While Callisto is unmistakably a woman, Diana's true identity remains ambiguous. However, hints of Jupiter within this disguise persist. The aquiline symbol of Jupiter lurks behind the pink drapery in the branches, clutching another one of Jupiter's symbols, the lightning bolt. More subtly, Diana exhibits a slightly darker complexion than Callisto, a nod to the ancient convention of portraying men with darker skin tones than women. And her gesture towards the quiver of arrows and neck of the dead bird, both phallic in shape, alludes to her true identity of Jupiter. While Ovid's original text downplays the sapphic undertones, Boucher's versions seem to amplify it. The Jupiter-Diana figure oscillates between being the holder of the male gaze and the object of it, adding layers of complexity and ambiguity to the gender identity and seduction. Jupiter's transformation into Diana challenges traditional binary gender roles. The viewer is expected to know the specific Ovidian myth to understand that Diana is actually Jupiter in disguise. Otherwise, they, like Callisto, will be deceived. However, when the viewer does know the myth, they must grapple with the discrepancies between what they know and what they see. Diana is not actually Diana, nor even a woman. The scene is intellectually heterosexual, but visually it is not. The intricate interplay of identities and transformations is mirrored in the evolution of Boucher's painting into different mediums. Similar to the metamorphoses described in Ovid, a transformative process unfolds as the original multichromatic oil-on-canvas painting transitioned into a mirrored monochromatic engraving on paper to an enamel painting on a curved surface of a perfume vase. Referring to the Callisto vase, the overall basic formula remains consistent in the transfer from painting to print to porcelain. Certain elements from the original Boucher painting are lost, while others are newly imagined by the Chelsea enameler. The reserve, framed within a gilded egg and dark quatrefoil, reverses the Boucher composition, affirming the use of the Gaillard print. The intricate softness of Boucher's coloration and paint application is lost in the manufacturing process. Diana and Callisto lack the delicate refinement that epitomizes Boucher's female figures. Callisto no longer gazes longingly at Diana. Instead, her pudgier, almost putti-like face stares blankly into the distance. The sapphic embrace, in turn, comes across as gauche. Callisto is no longer in a sensual and erotically charged scene brought forth by the putti's arrow and Jupiter's seductive tricks. The passivity of Boucher's original composition is transformed into something entirely unsexy. Both Diana and Callisto have lost many of the elements that made them objects of sexual desire to each other and to an audience. To a potential heterosexual male viewer, the Callisto vase does not have the same arousal-inducing capabilities. However, to a potential queer woman, the vase still conveys the potential of intimate love between two women. Returning to the whole of the vase, the floral designs decorating much of the vase's body trace their origins with the German Meissen porcelain factory. Before the 1750s, a Meissen was the only European porcelain factory to engage in large-scale botanical decoration. A Meissen cup and saucer set at the British Museum treats the flowers as the main subject matter and with a relative degree of naturalism. When the Chelsea Porcelain Factory was founded in 1744, they looked to the Meissen factory as the pinnacle of porcelain production and produced their own floral decorated wares. Meissen's botanical wares clearly inspired Chelsea's collection of Sir Hans Sloane wares, named after the famed naturalist who began the collections of both the British Museum and the Natural History Museum, London. Sloane was an influential founding member of the Chelsea Physic Garden, an apothecary's garden home to native and exotic flora, a short walk from the Chelsea Porcelain Factory. By the 18th century, the garden had become a hub for some of Europe's foremost botanical illustrators, including the German artist George Dionysius Ehret, whose prints were frequently used as references for the Hans Sloane wares. The flowers on the Callisto vase maintain the scientific naturalism of the Hans Sloane wares, but instead of the sterility of plain white porcelain, the gold anchor botanical wares often appear on a gilded gold ground, as seen on the Callisto vase. Departing from the concept of flowers as mere decoration, as with the Meissen wares, the Chelsea Porcelain Factory's botanical wares of the raised red and gold anchor periods act more as markers for greater eco-critical concepts. The orange lily on the back of the vase features 6 vibrant orange petals, curved slightly upward and speckled with dark spots surrounding a brown stamen. The orange petals, dark spots, and vague lily shape resemble those of multiple species collectively known as tiger lilies. Referring back to the Chelsea factory's history of referencing botanical prints for their wares, George Dionysius Ehret created prints of a flower very similar to the one on the Callisto vase, Lilium superbum, or the Turk's cap lily. A plant study completed by Ehret in the 1740s, now at the Victorian Albert Museum, notes in Latin that the lily was sketched from the garden of Ehret's friend, Mr. Peter Collison, in Pennsylvania. The Turk's cap lilies in the print and the flower on the Callisto vase share many of the same features. However, while the Turk's capped lilies are all downturned with strongly recurved petals, the flower on the Callisto vase is upturned with petals that are less recurved. And in the 18th century, that ornamental hybrid lilies of today that might resemble the one on the vase did not exist. The orange lily on the Callisto vase thus operates as an artistic hybrid, a cross between the Turk's cap lily and potentially a variety of upturned lily or daylily. Returning to Ehret, his friend Peter Collison wrote on his copy of the drawing that the lily was, quote, sent from Pennsylvania to England by John Bertram in spring of 1736, end quote. Pennsylvania was founded as an English colony under a royal deed from King Charles II in 1681. The Turk's cap lily, native to the land many colonies occupied, could be argued as a newly accepted British flower. The land is now British-owned, and under the same colonial line of thinking, so is the flora. The lily, like the indigenous people of Pennsylvania, is a victim of British colonization, literally being uprooted and displaced. The striking appearance of the lily made it a likely candidate for the Callisto vase. The lily's exoticism matched the ornateness of the vase. But this exotic look carries with it a darker history of human intervention in the natural world. Through an eco-critical lens, this floral representation, among others on the vase, symbolized ecological exploitation. The Turk's cap lily is victim to the colonial expansion of the British Empire, highlighting the complex interplay between human agency and the environment during the Enlightenment. Furthermore, the flowers on the Callisto vase serve purposes beyond mere decoration, extending their visual and intellectual significance to themes of sexuality. The violet flower at the top right frame of the quatrefoil acts as a signaling device for female homosexuality. Violets are first associated with female same-sex through the poetry of the ancient Greek poet Sappho. This association between violets and queer identity underscores the broader phenomenon of using symbols to communicate aspects of one's identity within the queer community. One of her poems, shown at right, describes the usage of violets in a flower crown for her lover. The poem also describes roses and crocuses, both flowers on the Callisto vase, within the same crown. Other works by Sappho also include references to clover, yet another flower included on the vase. It is possible that the owner of the Callisto vase recognized the visual and intellectual connection between the sapphic scene of Diana and Callisto and the violet flower. While it is unlikely that the Chelsea enameler intentionally included the violet as a queer signaling device, its coincidental placement near the reserve on the front of the vase made it noticeable where an educated woman familiar with the classical literature of Ovid and Sappho could have seen it and made this connection. This portrayal of sapphic undertones in the Callisto vase legitimizes explicit same-sex love in a piece of decorative art, while also subtly nodding to sapphic desire, hidden within a guise of heteronormativity. The vase would have likely been placed in a woman's dressing room, a space that was not entirely private as seen in the toilette. Positioned strategically, it could navigate societal expectations while allowing for personal expression and indulgence. One interpretation of the vase's imagery aligns with the narrative of Jupiter disguised as Diana, celebrating the virtue of chastity, as Callisto was punished for failing to uphold her virginity. Jupiter's eagle, clutching thunderbolts, and hidden in the curtains above the scene, serves as a visual reminder of heterosexuality, reinforcing the notion that the scene is not queer. However, for a potential queer owner, the Callisto vase becomes a clandestine representation of female homosexual love, offering a glimpse into the owner's sexual identity within the constraints of societal norms. Thus, the vase becomes an object where conflicting narratives of sexuality and society intersect, inviting viewers to bring their own interpretations. One would expect the Chelsea porcelain manufacturer's Callisto vase to embody a sense of Britishness, being the product of the first porcelain factory in England at the onset of George III's reign. However, the Callisto vase exhibits a unique fusion of German, French, Chinese, and American visual and material sources. This blend echoes the deceptive nature of Jupiter, resulting in a globally influenced object. The vase's international character intertwines with its metamorphic qualities, offering multiple interpretations depending on the viewer. It serves as both an expression of female same-sex love and a reinforcement of heterosexual morality, while also documenting the ecological impact of human intervention in the natural world. In the same way that Hogarth's The Toilette reacts to the socio-political landscape of Georgian London, the Chelsea factory's Callisto vase is informed by the same ideas: nationalism, colonialism, gender, and sexuality. However, where Hogarth mocks, the Chelsea factory seems to celebrate. Consequently, the Callisto vase operates as queer in multiple ways. In the sexual sense, it refers to the visually sapphic image of Jupiter in the guise of Diana and Callisto. In the non-sexual sense, it appears as odd, strange. It's an anomaly within the English Rococo, the very Rococo that Hogarth defines. But despite this, it still encompasses many of the same themes. The Callisto vase almost acts as an antithesis to what Hogarth does in The Toilette, but is simultaneously just as much of a spectacle, offering the potential for sapphic indulgence. Thank you.
And our fourth and final speaker will be Leea Kramer. Leea arrived at UC Davis after studying art history at our sister institution, UC Santa Cruz on the coast. She's interested in late 18th and 19th century French art, and especially on how museums present this era to their audiences. She currently holds the Griffith Curatorial Internship here at the Shrem. The title of her paper today is Aesthetics and Artifice in the Boudoir from the Hôtel de Crillon. There you go.
Okay. Where's the? Oh,
It's totally different. Isn't this yours here? I gotcha. Did it go
Sorry,
away?
I just-
I gotcha.
It's on the other screen.
thank you, Paul.
No problem.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Yonan, for such a kind introduction, and thank you for being a fabulous chair of my thesis. Today I'll be presenting a abridged version of my thesis work, now entitled Self-Fashioning Nation and History in Marie Antoinette's Bergère from the Chateau de Saint-Cloud, but we will be getting to the Crayon Room. Don't worry. Okay. The late Karl Lagerfeld, figurehead of an international luxury goods empire and a modern embodiment of Rococo sensibility, suggested in 1989 that nothing so well represents the soul of a whole century as the carved wooden chair of 18th century France. If one is to take Lagerfeld seriously, and I think one should, to engage intellectually with seating furniture is to reveal the internal tension underlying the heavily mythologized and arguably overdetermined histories and personalities of the French aristocracy. Marie Antoinette, as the last queen of France, is subject to a disproportionate amount of this imaginative conjecture. While ample scholarship explores how queendom was reflected and subverted in her appearance and comportment, less attention is paid to how her furniture and personal spaces negotiated her relationship with the absolute French monarchy, especially those commissioned in the final years of the Ancien Régime. Mimi Hellman's theory of the work of leisure provides precedent for approaching the construction of elite social personae using luxury furniture both as an index of cultural conventions and as social actors. Objects in the system of social relations were not owned but performed. The cabinet des toilettes, a highly specialized room where aristocrats were expected to engage in a public dressing ritual, is where this work most obviously manifests. Marie Antoinette had her first French toilette ceremony performed on her in a portable tent on an island in the Rhine during her transfer between the Austrian and French courts in the spring of 1770. Though queens of France are necessarily foreign, it was through the toilette that a degree of Frenchness could be approximated. A suite of furniture designed by Jean-Baptiste Claude Seignet in 1788 for Marie Antoinette's toilette at the Chateau de Saint-Cloud complicates the traditional performance of self ascribed to this space. By analyzing the visual, material, and relational significance of Marie Antoinette's Bergère à la Reine from this suite, both in its original context at Saint-Cloud and in the restaged Crayon Room at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, this thesis argues that furniture played an integral role in aristocratic self-fashioning and continues to both create and convey malleable historical meanings today. Bergère had an established connection to expressions of power in France prior to the 18th century. The strict social hierarchy of Louis XIV's court at Versailles equated seating and the comfort afforded to sitters with status. The chair most similar to the later Bergère ranked at the top of the system. One's rank or favor with the king determined if they were permitted to sit, the type of chair they could occupy, and if the chair had backs or armrests. With the death of Louis XIV in 1715, court conventions were relatively relaxed, and the form of the bergère was integrated into the luxury furniture market by the 1720s. Bergère, like many other kinds of French furniture, are named after a social type, in this case, the humble shepherdess, in reference to the idealized bucolic landscapes of picturesque fabrics early iterations were often upholstered in. A bergère, in its simplest form, is a deep-seated, generously padded armchair with upholstered armrests and a detachable seat cushion. The two most common bergère subtypes, the bergère à la reine and the bergère en cabriolet, have flat and curved backs respectively. Other forms of mobile, single-occupancy seat furniture like fauteuil have a very similar structure, though tend to feature less padded, shallower seats with open armrests. A simpler chaise has no armrests at all. Not only is the bergère more comfortable than most other available chair types, it provides relative privacy. This is because it can accommodate only one person, and the upholstered sides have the potential to block the lap and hands from view. Aesthetic theories and innovations led to more compartmentalized noble dwellings and complex furniture designed by the mid-18th century, where new seating types were developed alongside traditional forms like the bergère to meet diverse interior needs. Curiously, bergères were still kept in small numbers at this time. For example, a large room such as a salon could have upwards of 20 standard fauteuils, several sofas, and there would still likely be no more than 4 bergères. This implies they retained, at least to some extent, a sense of historic exclusivity, whether this had translated into an enforced hierarchy or not. This is true of Marie Antoinette's toilette at Saint-Cloud. The seating furniture of the suite inventoried in 1789 records 4 fauteuils, 1 sultan, 1 fire screen, a footstool, a table de toilette, and a singular bergère. It has been suggested that the bergère is uniquely suited to the cabinet de toilette for its mobility, width, and depth, which could better accommodate the large dresses of the 1780s. Not only could one splay their voluminous skirts over the armrests, but this type of armchair provided the sitter an opportunity to display their physical mastery of both the fashionable dress of the moment and the control necessary to delicately sit down in and stand from its ample cushion. The bergère's singularity indicates that this more native French chair form, as opposed to the Ottoman origin sultan, retained its symbolic relationship to previous royal custom while appealing to contemporary standards of etiquette. Within the theater of the toilette, the bergère thus contributed to the queen's self-fashioning. The Château de Saint-Cloud, for which the suite of toilette furniture was commissioned, can be considered a site in which Marie Antoinette endeavored to subvert France's patriarchal regime by challenging traditional conceptions of sovereignty through its very existence. Saint-Cloud is 7 miles northeast of Versailles and 7 miles southwest of the Tuileries Palace in central Paris. Marie Antoinette requested the property after falling pregnant with her 3rd child because she wanted a larger summer home than the Château de la Muette, which the family maintained in the nearby Bois de Boulogne. The Queen also insisted the title be put in her name. Purchased in 1785 by Louis XVI from the Duc d'Orléans for 6 million livres, Saint-Cloud contributed to a groundswell of unpopularity, and her unprecedented ownership of it was considered immoral and impolitic by members of Parliament. While French noblewomen were unlikely to own property in the 18th century, the Queen of France, both as a foreigner and the body through which French sovereignty materialized in the form of the future king, was effectively barred from the practice. Marie Antoinette's ownership of Saint-Cloud thus violated one of the basic gender tenets under which French royalty typically operated. Upon obtaining the property, she enthusiastically threw ample time and resources into preparing the chateau to her liking. This included hiring her favorite architect, Richard Meek, to expand the domestic quarters alongside the royal menuisier, Senet, to provide several suites of furniture. Marie Antoinette's ownership of Saint-Cloud was perhaps more personal than a new decorative project, though. As the youngest daughter of Empress Maria Theresa of Austria, she was raised in an aristocratic environment where women could both wield power and actively shape the physical space and related rituals in which it manifested. Throughout her childhood, her mother continually made and remade the Schönbrunn Palace, the family's summer residence outside of Vienna, according to her personal and political needs. The Petit Trianon, Marie Antoinette's personal estate at Versailles, was often derided as a Little Vienna or Little Schönbrunn, serving as a retreat from court life. In obtaining and renovating Saint-Cloud as her family was growing, perhaps Marie Antoinette was creating a refuge separate from both Versailles and the Trianon, a place where she could negotiate the expected rituals of royal life, like the toilette, on her own terms. Oh, a little early. Saint-Cloud's distance from Versailles and her apparent control over it further created the conditions for a matrilineal line of succession. Since the birth of her 2nd child resulted in a male heir, she had fulfilled the requirements of Salic law and found several ways to undermine the rigorous performance of queenship without jeopardizing her access to the luxuries it provided. Marie Antoinette seems to have been adamant about keeping her eldest daughter and unborn children in France. This desire was in clear opposition to their status as enfants de France, who could be used to form political alliances with other European powers through arranged marriage. Raised to be a political pawn herself, the Queen was somewhat disenfranchised by her childhood, which ended abruptly upon her betrothal to the French Dauphin in 1770 at the age of 14. Having an estate like Saint-Cloud to herself meant she could potentially bequeath it to one of her children, which was perceived to disrupt the way royal succession, property ownership, and alliance-making traditionally operated within the French court. The upholstery of the bergère and the larger suite further offers a site upon which Marie Antoinette experimented with her symbolic orientation within the French monarchical system and contributed to a visual vocabulary that encapsulated her intentions at Saint-Cloud. The suite of furniture was specifically adapted to be upholstered with the Queen's own embroidery. Though it appears she did this for certain individual furniture items prior, the Saint-Cloud suite is unique in that she embroidered the upholstery for the full set. The only surviving intact embroidery from the suite is a cotton panel of the fire screen that features Marie Antoinette's monogram of an overlapping M and A at the center, bordered by flower-specked vines, all stitched with silk thread. The suite was reupholstered in 2006 to reflect the Queen's embroidery style derived from the fire screen panel, as well as photographs and remnants of the original upholstery seen at center. Analyzing the replicated embroidery is useful to think through its symbolic resonances with the bergère form. As seen on the back seat cushion of the bergère, the bergère features an alternating point grid pattern that switches between rows of delicate blue and yellow flowers sewn using a satin stitch. Flowers have been called Marie Antoinette's expression of freedom, making it important to consider the potential relationship of those represented in embroidery to the Queen's extensive garden at the Petit Trianon. The three-pronged double spike of the blue flower indicates it may be a cornflower, which was a personal favorite of the Queen's, known to carpet the meadows at the Trianon in the early summer. Beyond describing her own eyes as cornflower blue, Marie Antoinette incorporated the flower and its distinct hue into much of her interior decor, going as far as ordering a 295-piece Sèvres porcelain service decorated with pearls and cornflowers for her dining room at Trianon. In the face of the lavish French court, the Queen equated herself with the perceived humility and modesty of the cornflower's small, angular bloom, which she felt conveyed a sense of rustic charm. The yellow flower, which looks most like a lily, is a bit more difficult to pinpoint. Marie Antoinette was particularly fond of the dainty lily of the valley, sprigs of which she was known to pass off to her closest friends and confidants at Trianon. The yellow flower could also be playing off the gold fleur-de-lis, the unequivocal symbol of French monarchy. Since the Louis XIV period, a floral motif with a similar profile has been incorporated into designs alongside the more traditional fleur-de-lis. Perhaps the most apt identification, though, is the grass lily, a native white wildflower known colloquially as la Dame d'Onzeur, or the 11 o'clock lady, because the flowers open at 11 in the morning on sunny days. In the Queen's daily schedule, 11 o'clock was the hour reserved in between her bath and toilette for personal activities, typically reading or embroidery. The indeterminacy of the lily type embroidery detail suggests Marie Antoinette had constructed a highly personal polysemic symbol that both referred to her preferred daily activities and her adoption into the French monarchical system. The self-referential qualities of this embroidery fundamentally alters the work of leisure typically ascribed to objects in the cabinet de toilette. By having a literal hand in the creation of the furniture that populates the space designated for self-fashioning at Saint-Cloud, Marie Antoinette implicitly advocates for her centrality within French royal affairs. Though queens of France were conceived as vessels through which the political power of the French monarchy was passed, the requirement that they take on French attributes through rituals like the toilette meant they wielded great cultural power. Marie Antoinette's embroidery demonstrates an acute awareness of this cultural power through the mastery and manipulation of its fundamental symbology. Embroidery, considered a virtuous manifestation of feminine labor in the 18th century, had matrilineal significance for Marie Antoinette. As a child, she would have learned various embroidery techniques. Under Maria Theresa, several rooms of the Chambron Palace were decorated with the family's embroidery, such as the breakfast cabinet that features needlework by Marie Antoinette's grandmother, Empress Elizabeth Christine. To embroider the upholstery of the toilette furniture at Saint-Cloud was thus a deeply nostalgic and self-actualizing endeavor for the Queen. Through the physical crafting and repetition of a personal symbolic lexicon, Marie Antoinette was rendered materially involved within her own making up, in a manner that both maintained and quietly subverted the standards of French court culture. In addition to the embroidery, the density and variation of the wood carving compounds the bergère's symbolic and performative purpose within the cabinet de toilette at Saint-Cloud. The wooden elements of the bergère and those of the entire suite reflects a preference for neoclassical design, which gained popularity by the mid-1770s and marked the transition between the late Louis XV and Louis XVI styles. Though just as elaborately decorated as furniture traditionally associated with the flamboyant Rococo style, the term neoclassical in this context indicates a more explicit reliance on visual forms attributed to classical antiquity, particularly those architectural in nature. This is immediately evident in both the ornament and general rigidity and linearity of the chair frame. Beginning at the bottom of the chair, the legs are turned and carved to appear as tapered ionic columns that meet the floor wrapped in acanthus and roped with molding. The blocks where the legs intersect with the seat rail features bundles of acanthus at the front, while the back have patera, bas-relief discs that often ornamented Roman architecture, which in this case appear as stylized flowers. The seat rail is also broken into 3 registers, a row of berry laurel or myrtle, surmounted by a meandering vine of ivy or grape leaves, topped by a finely carved band of waterleaf molding. The stiles are carved as Doric columns featuring a flower-studded collar and egg and dart ovolo capital. These are surmounted by 2 patera-faced blocks further capped with leafy finials. The middle portion of the stiles are overlaid with a large acanthus leaf extending toward the stuffed pad of the armrest. In front of this pad, the arm ends have been carved into finial-top baskets flanked by leafy volutes, the scroll-like motif found at the capital of Ionic columns. A medallion carved with Marie Antoinette's monogram, which matches that found on the embroidered fire screen panel, sits above a frieze of flower heads interlaced with vegetation. It rests on sprigs of cabbage roses strewn across the rail, held together by a loosely wound ribbon. Pink cabbage roses were another flower Marie Antoinette associated with herself, and they often accompanied her in portraits. The prefix Maria was given to all female children in the Habsburg imperial family to venerate the Virgin Mary. The pink rose, an emblem of the Virgin, thus became incorporated into Marie Antoinette's personal symbolism to indicate her Austrian heritage, piety, and fecundity. Returning to the arm ends, the basket rests upon a female term in an Egyptian nemes, a striped headdress associated with the power of the ancient pharaohs. A term is a sculptural form in which a bust is carved into the top of a pillar that tapers into a quadrangular base. The front of the pillar is decorated with a pine cone-tipped thyrsus, a type of Bacchic ceremonial spear bound in laurel leaves. Art historians consider Marie Antoinette an early and key proponent of Egyptomanie, or Egyptomania, a renewed interest in the cultural legacy of ancient Egypt. For Marie Antoinette, among other members of the aristocracy who took an interest in Egypt as early as the 1770s, allusion to the ancient society may have referenced its cultural permanence, architectural grandeur, and aesthetic simplicity, drawing parallels between the dynasties of Egyptian antiquity and the structure of the absolute French monarchy. Only the Sultan features the same Egyptian terms as the bergère. The fire screen has 4 female figures in reclined philosopher poses and 1 reclined female figure at its top, currently in a cornucopia, which may be an allegory for abundance or an allusion to Tyche, the Greek goddess of chance. The foci alternatively feature busts of Diana, Roman goddess of the hunt, on their terms. The suite's woodwork is a sweeping gesture toward the fashions of late 18th century neoclassicism. The variation with the set could indicate these figures were conceived as part of an independent pantheon of classical female archetypes whose associated qualities the queen could identify herself with. In conjunction with the personal symbolism Marie Antoinette had carved into the bergère, namely her own initials and the cabbage roses that grace its top rail, the Egyptian terms and the wider set of female classical reference come to support, decorate, and legitimize the layered labors of a self-styled matriarch, particularly in the context of the toilette at Saint-Cloud. Though this historically oriented interpretation of the bergère offers a nuanced understanding of how Marie Antoinette negotiated property, personal space, and self-expression toward the end of the Ancien Régime, its work is not exclusive to the 18th century. Now included in a period room and the Reitzman Galleries at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, the bergère continues to shape Marie Antoinette's legacy while further embodying the soul of the era in which it was produced. Designed to track historic developments in and the influence of 18th century French decorative arts, these galleries implicitly rely on the work of leisure to educate visitors and stimulate speculation regarding the activities and livelihoods of the aristocrats they pertain to. The boudoir from the Hôtel de Crillon at the Met, affectionately known as the Crillon Room, combines boiseries, painted wood wall paneling from a mid-18th century palace on the Place de la Concorde, with several mobile objects, including the bergère, its matching sultan, several chaises, the suite's original table de toilette, and 2 side tables. This staged interior, one of 8 rooms representative of 18th century France, while ostensibly providing insight into the ritual of self-fashioning in the 1780s, glosses over the personal and political complexities of Marie Antoinette's life in the same period, obfuscating the way an item of furniture like the bergère might encapsulate them. The 2006 renovation of the room, including the conservation and reupholstery of the furniture inside of it, constitutes a superficial effort to provide a sense of authenticity without fundamentally altering the room's interpretive scheme. This curiously coincided with renewed interest in renegotiating the Queen's legacy in both popular culture and academic contexts. The display of 18th century furniture within period rooms has implications for the perception of French cultural heritage and its apprehension in the American context. The Chateau de Saint-Cloud has been left in ruins since its destruction in 1870 during the Franco-Prussian War. The Hôtel de Crillon, while structurally intact, has been a luxury hotel for more than a century. Its Grands Appartements were lavishly renovated in 2017 by Lagerfeld himself. Since the architectural context, the constituent elements of the Crillon room were intended for are fundamentally altered, this period room is one of the primary mechanisms through which the history of these sites is materially reflected and encountered. The display of an object such as Marie Antoinette's embroidered bergère, when considered a soul for the period, renegotiates and even performs history in novel ways. Thank you. I'll leave it. Okay.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much for that. And we have some time for some questions. So I would like to ask the 4 speakers to come up, and maybe we can arrange some chairs up here so that you can, yes. Oh yeah, let's get this set up here first, and then you can ask that question again. Once we get them up here. Yeah. Can we like move some chairs?
We can stand. Sit.
Okay, there's a mic that should be traveling around. Okay, there. All right, so you can ask your question. There's a microphone coming toward you. Yes, sir.
Pardon me. I was stuck in traffic, but I missed the lecture of the Olmecs.
Did you have a specific question about it that you were curious?
Well, I have autism, so my communication's not the best, but I've been following the Olmecs my whole life, and I have I'm very infatuation about the Olmecs, but can you please tell me what you covered? Or?
Well, I looked at female power.
What?
Louder? Okay. I don't have a microphone. Go ahead. I briefly discussed a portion of my thesis, which was looking at one example of a small jade figurine found at La Venta that, as far as I can tell, represents a female of power in La Venta. And that is kind of contradictory. I was relying on Dr. Follansbee's research, which has established that this figure is female in an offering of 16 figurines that were all considered male since their discovery in 1955. But I wanted to elevate her. I noticed her when I was looking at the offering, and she just seemed distinctive. And the closer I looked and the longer I looked, the more she was distinctive, and she did not match the other figurines in the offering. So that was how I decided that she was worth something more than just a female.
I have one more question. Are you familiar with Dr. Cole?
Mm-hmm.
Have you met him?
I have not met him. I do
passed
follow
away.
his research.
Well, really? Wow.
Yeah, definitely.
Can I talk to you a little bit?
After, yeah, definitely. Yeah, come find me.
Okay, I'm a artist, painter, and I've done a lot of image of the Olmecs
Oh, I'd love to see that.
for decades.
That would be fantastic
Okay,
to see.
all right, thank you.
Yeah. Should we do more on my questions or just?
No, have a seat.
I have a question for Ms. Nakazawa. At the top of your vase, not your vase, that'd be cool, but no. At the top of the Met's vase, it looks like there's an 8 underneath an 8. What are your thoughts on kind of the shape of the stuff at the top?
Oh dear. When I was speaking with the curators at the Met, I asked about that, and some of it is believed to be, maybe it could be neo-Gothic, which was happening at the same time, specifically with Horace Walpole's Strawberry Hill House, and he has a queer individual, so potentially, to me that's a little reaching, but you know, you never know.
Further questions?
Hi, all. Thank you so much. This is a question for each of you, actually. If you could write a wall text or wall label about the works that were in your theses, what is the one piece of information that you would include?
Yeah, so for this, I would include the fact that many scholars had previously believed that this was just a poorly done mosaic, and that is actually how the site is presented even until today. And I would want just for viewers to understand that the people who made this, so Marianos and Hanina, maybe didn't mean that actually, that they had purposely made those choices, so just kind of presenting that.
Something I would want to emphasize in a wall text about this chair, which I'm lucky that this object is on display at the Metropolitan Museum of Art and has a label associated with it, that does not emphasize that the chair is embroidered or was embroidered by Marie Antoinette. And so I think that would be a fruitful place to start with kind of interpreting the chair more for the public in a meaningful way. And that's something that I think more about in the thesis.
Well, my object is in the Met. It is currently not on display and probably will never be. So I would love for it to have an object label to begin with. But I would love for there to be just a very open discussion about the queerness in the vase and the potentiality that there could be, instead of just labeling it as a heterosexual myth.
Okay, that is a very difficult question. But I think that I might emphasize her age, because I think age kind of gets overlooked when we're looking at figural representations from Mesoamerica. You know, we've got that first problem of, oh, everybody's male. Look, it's a chief. It's never, you know, a chief, well, a female. But the age, that to me seems important, to start acknowledging elderly people in representations from the ancient world. Yeah. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, all of you. That was wonderful. It's fantastic to see your projects come to fulfillment and for you to present them all to us. This is another question for all of you, but I wondered if you, one or more, or all of you, could talk a little bit about one of the challenges that you faced in your research and how you moved through or past those research challenges.
To be honest, it's about the information that you're working through this process. and you're reading as much as you can. And every single time you find a new piece of information, there's another one right around the corner, and another one right around the corner, and another one right around the corner. And you realize that all you're studying is just showing you how little you know. And that if you keep going, you're just going to learn more and more and more. So trying to stop, to find that stopping spot where you're like, okay, this is okay, this proves my point. That to me was the biggest challenge, because I know if I go to the library one more time, there'll be 10 more books that I never saw, even though I've been looking for them for 2 years. Yeah.
For me, it was definitely the fact that there was no smoking gun of homosexuality within my vase, and I was providing a very speculative reading of it, and that I had to cope with myself, my own feelings about, like, I think I'm reaching here, but I think it was a personal issue, but I think I did a good enough job.
I think I also had a similar challenge in the sense that I felt like I was speculating a lot in some regards, and like where is this information? Finding and feeling good about the information being in the historical record. Like, at what point does it feel like it's settled, or at what point do we decide that this is more of a speculative endeavor? And so I found that challenging. And then also thinking about the 18th century context in conversation with the contemporary display practices around 18th century furniture was very complex, and I'm still working through it and haven't fully figured it out, but no, it's in process.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what our graduates here have been saying, but one thing for me especially was working with the inscriptions and the ancient languages that hadn't been translated before. So, and especially because the Greek, especially in the synagogue, was inscribed or written down by people who did not speak Greek as a first language. It read very much so as a Semitic languages, so kind of traversing through multiple foreign languages by people who may not have fully understood them, and kind of what that meant to the synagogue itself, which I go a little bit more in the thesis about itself. Yeah.
Great question. Further questions? Lena?
I have a question about the vase. I was wondering if the image on it was painted, because you said enamel, so I'm wondering if it was glazed and then fired, or was it painted after the ware was done being fired?
It was painted with enamel. I mean, I am fully an art historian, and I do not understand fully the creation process, but it was painted with enamel is my understanding of it.
Gold was lusterware?
It's gilded with gold.
Oh,
I don't know the process entirely.
Any other questions? One over here, Rebecca.
I guess I'm asking this question as I'm kind of entering the master's program myself. But what led you guys to select these pieces as your points of research? Obviously, you may have started with a point of interest, but how do you find these incredibly specific pieces that may not have even been on display? That's my question.
Okay, well, the Olmecs are the reason that I'm in college. I saw a monumental head, and I swore that that's what I was going to be studying, was the monumental, the big colossal heads. And I honestly, at this point, don't remember when I encountered offering number 4. But I do remember looking at it, and just something about figurine number 9 immediately jumped out to me. I don't know exactly what it was or why, but yeah, I've been hooked on it ever since. And I've tried in my other seminars to get away from the Olmec, sometimes successfully, but very rarely. I'm just utterly enraptured with them. And finding this little figurine and showing that she was more than just a female and more than just a figurine within an offering was really
quite exciting to do?
For me, I had always loved ceramics. I did it in my undergrad, and Dr. Yonan really wanted me to pursue that. He also wanted me to pursue something gay and also something in the 18th century. I was forced into the 18th century, and eventually, by searching all the major museums, like their collections, I came across the Diana and Callisto after Dr. Yonan suggested the myth to me, and so I found this vase on the Met, and it was so interesting, and here we are.
Like Allison, I also did not study the 18th century, but to be fair to Dr. Yonan, we developed these papers out of a seminar about gender and materiality in the 18th century, which gave us a venue to think about it more complexly. And I actually came at my paper topic through Karl Lagerfeld, I would say, not necessarily through chairs. It was his themed Met Gala last year called A Line of Beauty, which is Hogarth's line of beauty about the S-shaped curve that characterized the Rococo period. And so I knew that Karl Lagerfeld was like a big collector and fan of 18th century aesthetics and of art and furniture. And I knew there was somewhere in my heart, there was a quote that would really just bring everything together, and that happened to be about chairs. And so I said, we're gonna use this quote and find a chair. And so I did all looking for chairs, and then I happened to come across the embroidered bergère that had been pretty understudied up until this point, or had been studied but without consideration for the embroidery. And so I thought that would be kind of a really fruitful place to start.
Yeah, so like Leea and like Allison, I found Beth Alpha through class. It was actually my very first quarter here, so I got very lucky with that. And I had originally presented on Dura Europos, which was very interesting. There's a lot of research out there for that. But when I looked into other synagogues, especially Beth Alpha, I just had so many questions about it, about why there was this pagan thing in a not pagan place, especially from what I knew, and basically Beth Alpha looked so different, and I was just curious as to why. So I just had all these questions, and I just kind of went with it.
Terrific. Well, I think we should conclude by thanking our speakers one more time for their fabulous work. And we can continue the discussion outside at the reception, so please join us out in the main hall.
Garage door.
Guys.